Hi everyone, my name's Mark Deary, and in this video I want to talk about something interesting. It's kind of going back to the video I made a few back talking about amateurs versus professionals, but it's an idea I wrote down a while ago and I alluded to it in one video. I said I might make a video about it one day, which was I want to work at a level where everybody is good at what they do, not necessarily professional, but good at what they do to the extent that they can all tell each other to go F themselves. I won't swear in the video, but basically tell each other to F off, because they're good at their job and they aren't offended by it, right? So I was watching the movie Saturday night. It was one of the best movies I saw this year. It was a really good movie. I think it was directed by Jason Reitman, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, I really enjoyed the movie. And in the movie, because they're behind the scenes getting ready to do the very first ever show of Saturday Night in America. We all know Saturday Night Live. And yeah, they're getting ready for the show and everybody's like backstage, not being very kind to each other. Everybody's being very rude. But again, everybody's professional. So it's like, F you, it's this. And this person's like, F you, it's this. And people take it as, well, you're a professional. I respect you because you're very good at what you do, right? Or whether they respect them or not, they're happy to say this to each other because it's the level they're working at. It was the exact same thing in probably the best novel I read this year. It was called The War of the Worlds Murder by Max Allan Collins. Such a good book. I highly recommend it. And in that book, it has a lot of behind the scenes on the writing and then recording of The War of the Worlds, the famous Orson Welles recording of The War of the Worlds, where people thought that the world was ending and it really massively affected America. It was crazy. It was crazy. And in the book, there's this extra conceit that there was somebody had been murdered while the play was happening to add extra suspense to it. It was so good. But backstage in that, behind the scenes, when they weren't recording on the radio, everybody was telling each other to go F themselves because they were experts. The composer was saying it, the director was saying it, the musicians were saying it, the actors were saying it, Orson Welles was saying it, the executives were saying it. So because everybody's working at that level where it's heated. There's a lot of heat and anxiety, but here's the thing. I've worked on a bunch of productions where the people are very insecure and they aren't necessarily very good at what they're working on. And so everybody's extremely sensitive. And it's a really hard environment to work in. Often the films I've worked on, and it's kind of plays into the documentary I've been working on, and plays into that because we would often get people to work for free for us, right? We didn't know what we were doing. We weren't doing it for any money. We were no budget filmmakers, right? And every film, like from our first film where we had a bunch of teenagers, we ran auditions and stuff, but it was like, well, back then we were naive enough to say, well, you'll be in a movie, being in a no-budget movie really isn't that great to a lot of people, right? And as we got more skilled, like now, I can promise anyone who I'd put in a movie that I'd make them look good. But I didn't even know that back then in that first movie, We were just so excited about making a movie. But you always felt guilty because they're coming for free. Like a lot of the time we wouldn't even feed them. We'd tell them to come after breakfast, and then the way they were scheduled was they would leave before lunch. And then they'd come back at 3 o'clock and they'd come and they'd go home at dinner sort of thing. Because we just didn't have any money. We just graduated. I was 22 years old, 20 years ago when I was making my first feature film. And because we had no money, we were begging for favors from everybody. And because we were begging for favors from people who weren't professional, because anyone professional would want money and we didn't have any money to give. So everybody was working for free. Everybody didn't know what they were doing. And we had a great fun time. And I love what we made. That's my whole documentary is about being a failed filmmaker. We didn't have success, but we had an amazing time. It was a life-changing experience. But yeah, the whole time felt like I couldn't tell people to go F themselves if they didn't want to do it. If somebody's like, I can't do this, I would have to beg them to do it because I had no control. I wasn't paying them, I couldn't fire them, they couldn't quit. They could quit. It was difficult, it was difficult. And so, yeah, and as projects have gone on, and especially the last 10 years being a teacher, whenever you help with any productions or whatever, everyone's so sensitive and you can't just say, look, just be, I guess it's about assertiveness. Maybe that'll be my next video, talking about assertiveness. But, I always feel like I need to be kind to everyone or nice to everyone because they're doing me a favor, when a lot of the time I was the one doing the biggest favor to help whoever it was who was trying to produce something. But on my own productions, yeah, bringing people in to work for free. I think going into next year, where I'm planning on making a lot of short films next year, and I'm going to have a lot of volunteers because people aren't going to be getting paid. I'll probably feed people if we're doing long days, but even then I'll try to schedule it because it's not for money, right? So I'll try to keep the budgets as low as possible. And I'm going to be upfront to say, if you're doing this, what are your reasons for doing it? Because it's like, I'm going to be doing it and here's what I'll expect or whatever. So I'm going to be clear around managing expectations. So hopefully I don't have to be as, ass kissy, like butt kissy of people. Like people will just know that we can work. And I say the best experience I had was on my 5th feature film, The Least Damnedest Thing, because it was just all our friends. So because they were my friends, I could be like, come on, man, you know, or whatever. Like, not that I was necessarily getting angry at everyone, but you could just be real. You didn't have to be like, please, please, you know, like, and so, yeah, but I've always, on my own projects, wished I could work at the level where I could just tell everyone to kiss my ass, you know. Obviously, when I was working in corporate videos and TV ads, there was a lot more of that because, again, everyone was being paid, everyone was working at a higher level. But in your own work, creative work, to be able to have everybody very good at their job. See, this is the thing, then you don't need to swear at each other because everyone's very good at their jobs. But someone who can assert themselves in their job. So it's like, I'm doing costuming, I know costumes, here's what you need. I'm good at sound, here's what you need. You know, like people being the best they are in their job. That's what you want to work with when you're working in creative work. Anyway, I just wanted to reflect on that today after talking about being amateur versus professional. It's like, professionals acting like amateurs. I think of the line from the Quentin Tarantino film Reservoir Dogs where Steve Buscemi says, am I the only person here acting like an effing professional? Like, people acting like amateurs. Like, you're like, you have no idea what you're doing, you're all incompetent. And, you know, it's like, yeah, to be able to work with people acting in a professional manner, even if they're amateurs because they know they're doing it for free, like acting in a professional manner, you know, it would be good to have everyone working at their best. But just, you know, regardless, being on set is fun. I don't want to have to kill myself to do it as much as I used to, just because it's not sustainable, and I'm going to make a lot of films next year. So anyway, there's me thinking out loud about that. I hope it was interesting for you to hear today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you haven't already subscribed, I'd love if you'd subscribe because I'm going to be doing a lot more talking about movies in the future. I'm getting towards the end of my 100 videos in 100 days. So it's pretty crazy to think it's almost over. But yeah, if you are interested in what I'm doing, subscribe. And you can also go to my website, markdeary.com, and sign up for my email list. I'm going to be doing email updates next year if I'm not making videos as regularly as I have been for the last 100 days. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.